Okay, I'm gonna discuss the stickleback fish briefly and explain what I learned about them in AP biology, or at least I'll try to remember some of the conceptual reasons as to why sometimes it's a popular question on the AP test or why they're referenced often on an AP bio test. So, stickleback fish, um, they're species of fish that develop adaptations. They respond to their environment very quickly compared to other species of animal. And the only other animals that they, or not really animals, but like the only other organisms that respond quicker to their environment are the single-celled like bacteria and maybe, well, technically viruses aren't alive, but viruses, they like microorganisms, they develop, they like their genome changes at a faster pace than macroscopic organisms. But anyway, so the stickleback fish, they're a popular macroscopic example to use when looking at evolutionary biology. And this is because the stickleback fish, they tend to live in little ponds like this. I mean, it's bad drawing of a pond, but bad drawing of a pond. Let's assume that's water, water, water. So let's say in pond A, there's like there's a predator that preys on the stickleback fish. In pond B, let's say there's plenty of little tiny little there's plenty of food for the stickleback fish, and and there's also predators also. Oh, I just said also twice. Yeah, whatever. And in pond C, there's a lot of other fish that compete with the stickleback fish for food. Let's see, I'll draw some more little food pellets here. And another fish. There we go. Now in pond A, where there's not that much food. Oh, I forgot to put food. Okay. So there's not as much food in pond A as there is in ponds B and C, but the stickleback fish, they have to fend for themselves against predators, and the only way they can really defend themselves against predators is with a spiny pelvis. Let's say this is a stickleback fish. Kind of a bad representation. Let's say this is the spiny pelvis that comes up from it. It's thin, but it's sharp. It's composed of calcium and a lot of other little nutrients that it gets from its diet. Now, since in pond A there's not that much food for them, then some stickleback fish will have the pelvis while others won't. It'll be a gene that switches from generation to generation, but I'm assuming that you already know about like Darwinism, about evolution, that I'm just explaining like why stickleback fish is used in the test. Anyway, so in pond A there'll be some stickleback fish with a spiny pelvis and others without it. And those without it, they'll become food themselves, while the ones with the pelvis, they'll be left alone and they'll be able to eat what little food there is. But once that food is used up, then the stickleback fish population is gonna adjust accordingly to the carrying capacity of that specific pond. Now I'm gonna move on to pond B, where there's fewer predators, but there's more food. In this case, most, if not all, of the stickleback fish will have a pelvis because there's a lot of food and there's few predators, so the carrying capacity is in favor of the stickleback fish. In pond C, since there's more food in there than pond A and pond B, but in Pond B there's more food than Pond C. So here it'll be like Pond A, where there's a mix of stickleback fish with the spine and some that don't have it. However, the one with no spine will have not an advantage, but the one with the spine really doesn't serve an important purpose since there's no predators in this particular pond. So if the stickleback fish has to compete with other fish, though the other fish don't attack the stickleback fish, they're not gonna need that spiny pelvis because they're not gonna be attacked. And that pelvis, it needs a consistent supply of nutrients to be maintained. And so it is a negligible amount of nutrients if you think about it, but it's still, over the long run, it can add up. And eventually, over time, the stickleback fish with no pelvis is favored. It's favored by in Darwinistic terms. It's more favorable than the fish with a pelvis. I hope you liked my video. Like and subscribe to show your love for a YouTube rookie.